issues that you can spot when you're digging into a manuscript. So you mentioned pacing. What are some telltale signs that the pacing needs to be tightened or needs some work?
So I tend to be an editor who really likes writing that moves. I love beautiful descriptive passages, but there's always a balance to any writing that you're doing. So I think in general, if you're looking at a page and you're just having pages and pages and pages of exposition, then chances are there are probably pacing problems in there. Just because you need a breakup in some sense. If it's just eons of description, then we run into Tolkien problems where you're just kind of, you can kind of zone out. So that's kind of just like a quick check. But in general for me, if I have characters sitting there talking to each other and just talking, then nothing's happening either. So it's kind of finding that right balance between, lingering enough to suck us into the world and making sure that we have enough time to breathe and kind of absorb it. I don't know if that really helps.
No, it does. Do you use any kind of a breakdown, like a guide to this is how many thousands of words before our inciting incident, this is how many thousands of words before our first dramatic turn? Anything like that where you specifically use project stories?
But I think it just varies from project to project. I think that I find that if I am reading and I'm kind of getting distracted, then there's often a pacing problem. And, for me, I think that one of the most important parts of writing is revising. And so that means that as an author, you love your words, you get your words on the page, but the bulk of your time really is spent, kind of digging into them again and again and again. And if you're reading your own words and you kind of suddenly find yourself going to Twitter or, why don't I clean the living room? And look, I know writers live by procrastinating and not getting the butt in the seat. But I think if you're finding yourself, you're there and then you find yourself, let me go get a glass of water. Like, I think there's often a sense there that something's not working. And so maybe don't get the glass of water and note that this is something that we need to focus on more closely.
What are some telltale signs that what's not working is structural within the plot itself? And what are telltale signs that it's just the plot's working fine, the author's just taking 2 pages to describe the coffee shop that they're meeting in or whatever?
So one of the things that I really like to think of every story, and this helps me for plotting and pacing. I think that every story can be boiled down into a few questions, or you should be able to boil down your story into a few questions. What does my character want? What's standing in his way? What happens if he gets it? What happens if he doesn't? And I'm going to totally mess up what each of these stand for, but I'm going to try it anyway. So what does my character want gives you, your desire that's kind of pushing your character through. What's standing in your way is your obstacles. And together, those create your conflict. So, whatever's standing in your way is preventing your character from getting their heart's desire. And the rest of the novel is really being spent fighting against that blockage to overcome it. What happens if you get it and you don't get it? Those are fueling your motivation. So the dread of not getting the thing is what's often driving your character's emotions. So what happens if you get it is setting up your stakes. And then obviously the journey to get that thing is really the bulk of your plot, and everything else that kind of all those pitfalls and like all the awful stuff you're throwing at your character along the way. That's what makes it interesting. So I like to tell, no matter how complex a story, I like to tell authors, like, stop, go back and answer those questions. And if you can't answer those questions, then you know that there's a plot problem, and there's probably a motivation stakes problem. So when I'm editing, I often find myself going back to those questions. But also, maybe we think we've established what a conflict is. But as you're going along, you start saying, well, is that enough of a conflict? Does that feel enough to satisfy and sustain a reader? And that's something that you really dig into in the revision process. But if you suddenly find yourself being like, is this really enough? Then that's probably that you need to drill back down into the plot and figure out some of those pieces. Whereas if you feel like you have all of those hitting and you're kind of going along and it just feels like it's taking a really long time to get to the next thing, that feels like it's a step toward progress, that's probably where we need to go in and see if everything there is really necessary or if there are some areas that we can kind of cut to get us there a little bit quicker.